Hello, good afternoon, Professor Bent Flyvbjerg. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm Giorgio Locatelli. I'm Professor of Complex Project Business at Politecnico di Milano and co-editor-in-chief for the Project Management Journal. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words about you?
Thank you, yes. And Giorgio, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Bent Flyvbjerg, and I'm the first BT professor and inaugural chair of major program management at Oxford University, and the Willem Kan Rasmussen professor and chair of major program management at the IT University of Copenhagen.
That's great. So probably people in project management know you for sure and all your accomplishment that you did over your career. And today we are here basically to celebrate another accomplishment, which is actually the first time that we award this prize, that is the PMJ Most Cited Paper for the last 10 years award. And can you tell me, this is about your paper, what we should know about Megaproject. And would you like to say a few words, the key idea of this paper?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm very honored about having received the prize. So thank you very much for that. And thank you to all the readers who have read and cited the paper. The purpose of the paper was for me to make an overview of megaprojects, and I thought there was a lot of things that people were not aware of regarding megaprojects at the time when I wrote it that was sort of coming out in my research, and that I'd already been researching for quite a number of years at this time. And I thought I would sort of collect these things in one place as a kind of an overview. And that's what I did with this article. And in the meantime, I've actually written a whole book about this that came out earlier this year. So the timing could not be better, you know, that I'm getting this prize now. And at the same time, the book, you know, is doing very well. It was actually last week, it was selected for the shortlist of Business Book of the Year with the Financial Times. And these are the same ideas as in the article, but updated and expanded upon.
That's great. So today we are here for the PMJ Most Cited Paper of the last 10 years award that you wrote 10 years ago. And I would like to pick some idea from that paper. The paper is very rich. There are a lot of ideas. I want to pick some and discuss with you some of these ideas. So let me start quoting your paper and using your words, okay? So in your paper, you say, success in megaproject management is typically defined as project being delivered on budget, on time, and with the promised benefit. So yes, cost and time are often short-term, years, so in the case of megaproject, decades or number of decades, and are related most of the time to the owner and sponsor, while benefits are experienced over several decades, if not century, by a plethora of stakeholders. So how should the planner and decision maker consider this aspect, in your opinion?
So I think that it's really nice and important that you mention all three, but let's look at the three and then decide which one is the more important. And obviously, it's the benefits. The benefits are why we're doing the projects. We're doing projects in order to deliver certain benefits, that we decide that the world needs these benefits and we need to build these projects, so incur the cost and the schedules and use the time in order to deliver these benefits. It's very interesting to note, however, when we look at both research but also practice, that benefit is the thing that people study the least and care the least about. If you look at data on projects, it's much easier to find data on cost and schedule than it is to find data on benefits. I would say probably 10 times to 20 times easier. And this is measured by like how many data points can we find in each of these categories. And the benefits has been a problem for us for many years. We're only just beginning to have enough observations on benefits that we can do meaningful statistical analysis on the benefit side. And like I said, that's a paradox because that's the real reason we're doing projects. But both practitioners and scholars actually don't focus on what's the most important. Instead, they focus on, you know, like the drunkard looking for their keys under a street light, and somebody comes by and asks, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my keys." "Where did you lose them?" "Well, over there in the shadows." "So why are you looking here under the light?" "Because this is the only place I can see." It's the same thing with the data. The only data that we can find under the streetlight are cost and schedule. We don't find benefits. They are over in the shadow, and we don't take the time and the effort to go there and look. This is something we need to do something about, both in scholarship and in practice in project management.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. I fully agree. This interview is going to be posted, among other things, on YouTube, and we expect that plenty of academics and practitioners will listen to this interview. So let me try to be a bit practical and discuss some example. So I'm Italian, and in Italy now there is a discussion about a very mega project, which is a long bridge over the Strait of Messina. So basically a bridge linking the south of Italy, Calabria, with Sicily. It's been in the agenda for many decades now, it might go on. And basically, this is going to be the longest suspended bridge in the world, 60% longer than existing longest suspended bridge in Turkey. So what in your paper useful to look at this mega project?
So, like you mentioned, this project has been around for a long time, been proposed for a long time. And it's an interesting observation that once a mega project has been proposed, it won't go away again. You know, even if it's silent for decades, it's going to pop up again, just because the idea is out there, it's recorded, and so on. It will happen again. The same thing happened with the world's longest suspension bridge at the time in Denmark, you know, which is the Great Belt Bridge. Mm-hmm. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world when it was completed, shortly after it was overtaken by the Kobe Bridge in Japan, which of course was destroyed by an earthquake. And now it might be the Messina Bridge. And so what does my paper say about things like that? First of all, it says that it's extremely risky to do projects like this, that most likely, whatever we hear the budget is going to be, it's very high likelihood that it's going to be higher than that, and even substantially higher than that. Whatever schedule we hear is being estimated for the project is likely going to take longer, and not only a little, but a lot longer than that. And the benefits are probably going to be less than those projected. So that's one thing we can learn. This is what we call base rates. So we have enough data now. We have a database with more than 20,000 projects. I keep saying 16,000 because that's what we mentioned in the book. But in the meantime, we have actually grown the database by 4,000 more projects. So it's 20,000 now. So we have good data that we can actually establish, like what are your base rates, as behavioral economists call it. And a base rate is the odds that you face when you do something. So the odds, it's like going to a casino. You know that there are certain odds if you're playing blackjack. There are certain odds if you're playing the roulette. Also, there are certain odds if you're playing the game of Megaprojects. And we have those odds, and the odds are against you if you're playing this game. Just like when you go to the casino, there's not a bank that will win there. Maybe the builders will win, but the odds are against you in the sense that you are not going to make what you thought you were going to make in cost-benefit terms when you play this game. That's what the data show very clearly. And that's a thing that you need to keep in mind for any bridge, not just a Messina bridge, but since this is going to be a very big and very expensive project, you know, the risks are going to be even higher for that project.
So if you have an elevator pitch with the Italian Minister of Infrastructure, what would be?
It would be get the base rates right. That's the very first step, because if you don't, you're going to have a spurious, that is a false business case. Your business case is going to be false, and it's going to tell you to build the project when you shouldn't, or to not build the project when you should. So you need to get the base rates right in order to understand what the real costs and the real benefits are. And that's possible. I mean, we have developed both data and methods for doing that. That are now used all over the world. I mean, in hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of cases.
Excellent. Let's move away from Italy and let's go to China. So in China, organizations seems able to deliver mega projects such as nuclear power plant or high-speed railway much faster and cheaper than in the European Union or in the USA. What's going on there? Doesn't the iron law that you describe in your paper does not work there? What's happening?
No, actually, we have studied this. We have a specific paper out on the Chinese projects. At first, it was very difficult actually to study Chinese projects because the Chinese don't share their data. And also, you can't trust the data in China. It's a well-known fact in all disciplines, not just project management, but in economics and whatever, health, that you can't trust data from China. That if the party says that there's no cost overrun, there's no cost overrun, just to take an example. Or if the party says that the population is healthy, then the population is healthy. So we had a data problem, and I went to Tsinghua University in Beijing, and I talked to colleagues there, and they were very clear that there was no way forward. We couldn't do this. Then some years later, a postdoctoral student of mine who had at Oxford, who had worked in the World Bank earlier, knew that the World Bank had data on China, and we investigated those data and found out that they were actually reliable because the World Bank had collected them themselves. And then we did a study of China, and we actually found that this is a myth, that China is so good at projects. There's one thing in what you said, Giorgio, that is correct. They are faster.
Yeah.
So why are they faster? Well, I would say two reasons. One is that they don't have the same laws and regulations regarding environment and health and safety and social impacts that we have in Europe and North America. And of course, that means that you can go through the planning process much faster because you don't have all these approval processes that you have to go through. And also the acquisition of land, when you're building infrastructure, is easier and faster in China, which is not always a happy thing, for the people who live in the right of way or of a railway or a motorway or a waterway or whatever it is. But that's the way it is. And that's why the data show clearly that China is faster than the West. However, China is not cheaper or have smaller cost overruns. The other reason that China may be faster is that they actually, in my interpretation, China is much more advanced regarding construction methodology than we are in the West. And we are probably going to get disrupted from China if we don't wake up soon in the way we do infrastructure. So China is much more innovative. They are much more, they use a standardized approach, a manufacturing approach, and so on, instead of the old-fashioned construction site approach that we still use mostly in the West. So it looks to me that this is also a reason that the China is quick, and I think it's something we should really pay attention to. It's a new development right now that both infrastructure and buildings are being built in new and innovative ways. It came out particularly clearly during COVID, when they had to build a hospital, in 21 days, and there's a hospital. Actually, one of my students in Hong Kong was leading the construction of the quarantine center in Hong Kong. First 1,400 units, then 3,500 units, built like Legos. So one Lego after the other, and you could have like a couple of people living in each Lego. And this was built in just a few weeks. This is a new way of doing things in construction that is learning from manufacturing, standardization, modularization. So you get assembly sites instead of construction sites. And this is one of my pet ideas, is that we need to get rid of the construction site. And construction and infrastructure will not move into the 20th century. I'm not even talking about the 21st century. They won't move into the 20th century until they get rid of the construction site and get into the assembly site, because not until then will we move into manufacturing, which is clearly a 20th century thing, where you build things in factories and then you assemble them.
As a person that studied modularization throughout his PhD, I fully agree with you and this idea. So let me be a bit provocative now, and let me go back to your paper, quoting a bit of your paper. So in this paper, you speak about the large cost overrun of the Athens Olympic. Now I'm quoting. For Greece, a contribution factor to the country's 2011 debt default was the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, for which cost overrun and incurred debt were so large that they negatively affected the credit rating of the whole nation, substantially weakening the economy in the years before the 2008 international financial crisis. So you touched the topic of Olympic Games and cost escalation of Olympic Games also in other papers. So should we stop to organize the Olympic Game? What's your suggestion for cities that are thinking about hosting the games?
So to answer your first question, yes, we should stop organizing Olympic Games the way we organize them today. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we have to stop organizing periods, but we have to find a different way of organizing the Olympic ways than games than the ways that we're using today. The ways we're using are simply too wasteful, way too expensive, way too wasteful, and often a trauma for each of the host cities. That it's just very difficult to get it done. And it creates kind of an emergency situation. I mean, in Rio de Janeiro, they even formally declared an emergency for the state of Rio in order to be able to access funds that would make it possible to complete the Olympic setup before the opening date. So it's really not the way to do it the way it's done today. The IOC was putting their head in the sand like an ostrich for decades about this. They basically said it's no, this is great, and it was great from their point of view because it's a great business for them. It's a monopoly. They have a monopoly here, and they are not regulated. So they get to do what they want. They made lots of money, but then hey, all of a sudden. And I think in part because we started publishing the data that we did, and the famous picture of the mayor from Rome with our study in her hand facing the world press. She's saying, Rome said they were going to host the Olympics. We have changed our mind because we read what it's going to cost us and how big the cost overruns can be. And looking at the economics of the city, we simply cannot afford it. So IOC, thank you, but no thank you. That's how it went, And Rome was followed by lots of other cities, like you can find 1-2 dozen cities now that have done this. And this really worries the IOC because at one stage there actually weren't enough cities to actually populate the planned Olympics, including the one next year and the one 4 years after that, so the 2024 and the 2028, where the 2024 goes to Paris and 2028 goes to Los Angeles. This was a fait accompli where the IOC told Paris and and Los Angeles, we guarantee that you get the Olympics if you agree to do 2024 and 2028, because we are actually afraid we are going to run out of cities who want to do it. That has really given a wake-up call for the IOC. So now they are trying to think up new ways of delivering the Olympics. In my analysis, from what I've seen from them, it's too little, too late. But it's better than nothing. At least they're aware of the problematic. But now is a time to think about how we can reorganize the Olympics. And in fact, I'm working on a paper about that with one of my colleagues right now.
And can you share some insight?
It's too early. I mean, we are not far enough. But part of it will be, the ideas of modularization. So. Okay. The IOC needs to standardize the Olympics much more. The problem is that everybody reinvents the wheel every time they're doing the Olympics. Not totally, but pretty much, I mean, there are some standardized elements, but there are few, and that needs to increase. So we need to have more standardized elements where we can use the experience from the previous time the next time. Maybe we should also think about hosting the Olympics in the same place. I mean, one idea would be, and some people have proposed this, let's move them to Athens, where they came from, and do it in Athens always. That's an idea, and I wouldn't be against this, but it's not necessary. I mean, we could do like a few years, once you build the venues, like let's say we're going to do the Olympics here 2 or 3 times, before we move on to the next city, so that the IOC can get this. They like to move around with this traveling circus around the globe, because it's good for their image and it's good for sports, they say, and so on. But we need ideas like that, where we really think about how to do it differently. The thing is to get what we call positive learning curves. So this is a thing that applies to all projects. We need to think about positive learning curves versus negative learning curves. And we should only do projects that have positive learning curves. So what are positive learning curves? Well, they are curves that apply to projects where you learn when you're doing them. So you do a project once, you learn something. So the next time you do it, you can do it a bit faster and a bit cheaper. And the third time you can do it even faster and even cheaper, and the fourth time, etc. It's something called Wright's law, discovered by an engineer called Wright, who were in aerospace and building airplanes, and he found that every time they doubled the production, they reduced the cost by 20%. That's a positive learning curve. So we produce more and more, and the costs come down because we are learning from what we're doing. Now, if you think logically, that should happen with everything that we do, right? Humans are actually very good at learning, and if we learn, we get better, right? And better means faster and cheaper, and better quality. But for some things, it doesn't happen. And one of those things are the Olympics, because we keep moving them around. The incentives are not aligned. So the incentives of the IOC and the incentives of the host city are completely misaligned. And that's the rule number one. If you're doing a project, is that incentives must be aligned, for the stakeholders that are involved if you're going to succeed. So that's just one problem out of many with the Olympics that you need. And it's why the Olympics have negative learning curves. They actually become more and more expensive the more you do them. I mean, that's strange. The same with nuclear power plants. More and more expensive the more you do them. The same with big hydroelectric dams. More and more expensive the more you do them. That's negative learning curves. And it's actually one reason that even China is not doing so well on nuclear power plants. Even though they are faster and they are doing more than the West, they are not nearly as fast and nearly as efficient as they are with their wind power and their solar power at present, which is scaling up, on steep curves very fast, whereas nuclear power is sort of flopping along at the bottom of the diagram. The diagram is in our book, where we compare wind, solar, and nuclear power in China to shoot down this myth that China can build anything fast. They can't when it has negative learning curves, because it's difficult for them as it would be for anybody who's trying to do things with negative learning curves.
Yeah, interesting the point of learning curve. I study with the topic in the nuclear sector, and there are good data from France. They show a learning curve at site level, not at national level. And because the team were changing from site to site, so there was very little chance to learn. The supplier were changing. It's a very interesting discussion. So
it's a very general discussion. It's extremely important concept. And like I started out by saying, every project manager and every project management scholar must fully understand this concept. And if they don't understand projects. And if they don't understand what makes a successful project and what makes an unsuccessful project, because it's really about learning.
And we go back to the point of manufacturing. The learning rate in manufacturing are much higher because there are the same people doing the same job with the same tools, etc. Yes, absolutely.
So and under a roof, under a roof, so the weather doesn't influence, the geology doesn't influence. So you're protected from the environment in the factory.
You're offsetting risk. So you wrote this paper 10 years ago. And if you have the chance to edit the paper today, what would you change? For instance, there is a big discussion now going on about artificial intelligence. There are discussions about SDG. How do you think these play in the narrative, this element play in the narrative of your paper? Is something new there?
So regarding artificial intelligence specifically, that's, that influences everything that we do, including projects. And, it's going to, and probably already is playing a role in project management. One thing that I see now is, I read articles about my work on the web, and it's so clear to me when it's written by a chatbot, it's just like bland and bullshit and filled with errors. And humans are better than that so far. I'm not saying that AI won't outperform humans sooner or later, and that actually is probably a big problem, the biggest problem with AI. So we need to think about. I think we need to think about the most basic question regarding AI. So humankind has constantly been on a curve where we are increasing our knowledge with very few pauses in human history. So tens of thousands of years, we have refined and increased our knowledge. Now let's imagine that we actually succeed in inventing AI that is more successful than us. And AI is working on the basis, as it already is, it's working on the basis of algorithms or models that we don't understand. So we actually don't understand what's going on in the AI. And many people argue that's not important as long as it works. Well, I want to ask the question, are we expanding our knowledge as human beings if AI becomes smarter than us? Or are we actually receding, in knowledge, like diminishing our knowledge? Is that going to be the consequence? I think it's really dangerous if we humans start inventing a thing and using a thing that might be diminishing the level of our knowledge. And AI could easily be, and already is to some extent, diminishing our knowledge instead of enhancing it. So that's the most fundamental question I would ask about AI. It applies to any sector of society, including project management.
We certainly do. And congratulations again for your prize. What does the Most Cited Paper in 10 Years award mean to you? How this will impact your future work?
Well, it's for me, it's just a great reaffirmation of my work, and both by PMJ, to gracefully and generously, create a prize like this. But even more, the readers who have read the article and cited it so much, it's not something that I expected when I wrote the article, and it's not why I write articles, but it's really nice when you get this kind of affirmation. So that's what it means. I mean, as a researcher that it can be, it's a long slog and sometimes very lonely, when you're doing your research, when you are closing the door to your study and you are poring over the data and you're writing your papers and your books. That's a slow, hard process. And you need encouragement from time to time. Otherwise, it's impossible to continue that process. And I feel that this is that kind of encouragement that really it makes me want to get up in the morning and do more of this. So that's the most important impact, and it makes me happy.
Great, and we are certainly looking forward to see more from you. Last point, is there anything else that you would like to say to the readers of the Project Management Journal, maybe to the younger scholar, people in their PhD? Do you have any word of advice from an accomplished professor like you?
First of all, I would say that we need you. If you're a young scholar, we need you. We need better people. We need better brains. We actually need to heighten the intellectual level of project management. It's way too sort of practical, hands-on, and it doesn't benefit from some of the greatest ideas that are out there. That other parts of the social sciences, and even calling project management the social science to some project managers and project management scholars is offensive. They say, no, it's engineering, it's not social science. But hey, anything that has got to do with people is social science, because we are studying the behavior of people. The problem is that a lot of research in the project management doesn't take that behavior into account, or doesn't use the cutting edge theories for taking that behavior into account. For instance, behavioral science, behavioral economics, which is one of the things that I've worked at, and I've had a lot of criticism from other project management scholars for doing this. They say, no, it's about the technical aspects of the project. It's not about these behavioral aspects. So we need young scholars who understand that this is done by humans for humans, and therefore behavioral science is key to making project management work. So that's my message to the young scholars. Also a message for Project Management Journal itself. I think it's a really great journal because it has very, very well struck the balance between practice and academia. And there are not a lot of journals that do that. Either they are too much in the practical sector or too academic. Too academic, using a language that nobody understands and very few reads. And it's kind of a club activity where scholars are writing for scholars, or too much in the practical sector where it comes too down to earth and practical, and it's just about the next day, what do you do on Monday morning in the office to make your project work better. I think PMJ really hits the balance right, and it's one of the reasons that I actually often I have decided for a paper, I could go for a more academic journal, but I would actually rather put it in PMJ because I get the readership that I want. I want to target both scholars and practitioners with my papers, and I want to reach both. I want both groups to read my papers and to cite my papers, and that's exactly what happens when I publish in PMJ, and that's exactly what has happened to the paper we are talking about here that won the 10-year prize. So I want to thank PMJ for not only the prize, which I'm very grateful for, but also running a journal that so skillfully navigates that balance between academia and practice. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for your kind words. It's something that we fully believe on. Professor Ralf Muller, myself, and Gary Klein stressed many times the importance of having good theory to navigate in the complexity of our data and make sense of the data that we go on. And that's sometimes difficult for people to understand, but when we have a good theory and good data, you can really extract powerful idea and powerful message in your paper. So thank you very much for this.
Giorgio, I want to emphasize what you just said, how important that is. I really want to support that and emphasize. You said strong theory and strong data. That's the key to good research.
Yeah.
And in project management, we often have weak, often ridiculously weak theories. And we often have weak, often ridiculously weak data. We got to get over that and do what you say, strong theory, strong data. That's the way forward.
Yes, and it doesn't have to, and we don't expect the people submitting paper to us every time to invent a new theory. We don't need that. We have plenty of very, very good theory around from other fields that need to be understood, need to be applied to the topic of project study. So when people think about theoretical contribution, they're always scared to have to come up with a new theory. No, it's not like that. It's to use theory to provide a meaningful contribution to project studies literature. So yes, absolutely, absolutely. So thank you again for your time today. Congratulations again. And I invite the people watching this video or listening to this podcast to subscribe to our social media channel. So we have a YouTube channel. We are creating a new podcast channel now. We have a Twitter account, and we have a LinkedIn page that is going to be brand new with a lot of new content. So we hope that you enjoyed this discussion. Certainly, I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot of new things. Thank you. And stay in touch with Project Management Journal. Thank you.
Thank you.